Okay, cool. So first up is general project updates. So the GUAC beta is coming up quite soon. And once again, this is the V0.1 beta. Parth, do you want to just talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I think let's see. Yeah. Okay. So we have like a, I think we've been working hard in the past couple of weeks just to clean up everything. Did a bunch of documentation around around GUAC, getting all the the API documented, GraphQL API documented, along with creating a bunch of demos. How do we deploy GUAC easily? There's like a Docker Compose, there's a Helm chart, everything. So there's a bunch of documentation that's new. We are moving a lot of that from the GUAC repo itself into its own GUAC, what is called GUAC docs. But that is actually going to be published through our website. So there is going to be a new guac.sh, and I can quickly share my screen here and kind of walk through that piece. So this is going to be linked from the main repo. We haven't done it yet, but this is I think we're still finalizing some things and so forth. But here, there's various blogs. At the same time, you can also go to the actual the community itself, right? So if you wanted to get started, some of the meetings for the Slack channel, the calendar invite for this specific meeting and so forth, all that stuff is there, as well as a contribution guide that Mihai is going to go into a little bit later. There's some blogs that are going to come out, so we're going to keep talking about like if there's integrations that are happening with GUAC. You can find them here between various different companies and so forth. And then if I click on demo, so this is the documentation page right here, and you can see it kind of starts here, and here you can kind of go down and figure out, okay, how to get started with GUAC, how do we get it up and running, and then the various different use cases. So here are some of the examples that the GUAC team kind of wrote up in terms of how to utilize the data that's in GUAC. We created a bunch of CLIs along with there's a visualizer component that kind of helps you visualize what you're actually looking at and so forth. Sort of like a couple examples down here. You can see you can actually view exactly what's happening in the graph, as well as a relationship between things and explore items and so forth. So this is just getting started. Like this is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. We kind of wanted to just for the beta release, we wanted to show people exactly, how the GraphQL API, allows you to do various integrations, right? It's not just like, oh, here's a database, but it's more like you can use it to do a lot more things. You can find information quickly. You can figure out, okay, what do I know about my supply chain? What don't I know? Can I find, if there's specific vulnerabilities, can I quickly locate them and so forth? So that's what all these use cases kind of go into. And then there's also a bunch of in terms of like, how does GUAC work, right? There are a bunch of components that kind of work together. How does all that kind of fit together? The GUAC ontology in terms of like how are the artifacts and the different evidence and all that kind of stuff kind of combined together to create the relationships that it has. And I think it's still missing, but there is another one that kind of goes into the GraphQL API. So like basically this is going to be updated before the release next week. So this would be the central place you can go in and kind of view all this kind of information. Any questions? So this will be linked from the main repo, and I think this is going to be like the central hub for documentation. So as we get more and more integrations, more and more features, we'll keep updating, and you'll see all that stuff in here. All right, hand it back to you, Mike.
Yep, thanks. Before moving on, is there any sort of big questions on the doc site or anything like that? Or the front page as well as the doc site? Cool. If not, I'm going to hand it over to Mihai to talk about the sort of contributor work and the contributor letter.
Thank you. Let me share the tab. So we have this contributing.md that we created. Oh, sorry, waiting for it to share. So we created this at the beginning of the repository, and we also had issue number 1, where people would register that I am proficient in this field, I'm interested in that, and I want to contribute. And we discovered that that issue was kind of like a blocker, and that was not as helpful on how to get contributions. So now we expanded the contributing.md to actually contain what are we looking for in the PRs and how you can create PRs and so on. And the most important part is we have this contributor ladder. So basically GUAC has like 5 topic areas of interest, starting from ingestion all the way to the clients. And in the middle, you have the GraphQL interface between ingestion side and the backend, or between the backend and front end or the clients. And so we have all of these 5 topics of interest, and people might be experts in some of them and not in others, or might be experts in all of them. And we also created this contributor ladder inspired by other open source projects, where people start as community participants, just sending a simple PR or several. And then as you contribute more, you get given the role of a reviewer, where you can start approving PR into that topic area. If you start showing deep expertise in some topic area, you can become an owner of that area. So you can actually participate in design review, approve design reviews for that area, and so on. And if you have expertise in a majority of topic areas of GUAC, you can become a maintainer like everyone else and get full rights on the repository and so on. And I also detailed all of the table in text. You can always read this. The last thing here is, once you get permission, or once you get a role, you can also decide, okay, I can no longer work on GUAC, something else happened, I switch project, I switch team, and so on. So you can voluntarily step down, or after a period of inactivity, you can get your role removed, and everything is documented in here. Any questions? If not, back to you, Michael.
Cool. Yeah, just one last call for questions about the contributor ladder. Gonna give it a, let me see if anybody.
I did one thing that I noticed in there in the maintainer section was the line about a maintainer might be required to work with GUAC clients, thus they might be required to sign NDAs. I thought that was interesting. I wasn't like sure if there was context around that, or like what the expectations were. Like as a representative of a company, I certainly can't do that on my own. So I'm curious, like I'm far from being a maintainer. This is my first time at call. So
yeah. So I believe hand it over to some of the other folks. I believe the intention here is, like, if you're a maintainer and a couple of like big use case sorts, folks with use cases, but they might want to talk about it a little bit more sensitively. There might be some NDAs there, but Mihai, Brendan, do you have?
Yeah, I think I'd like to add that I think we haven't had to do this yet. I think we just wanted to bring it up. I think when it happens, we'll figure it out. Maybe there's a way for us to translate requirements. If that's not possible, I'm sure we can figure out something out to work around it. But I think that where we kind of foresee it, especially since Kusari is working with a lot of the financial side of the industry, that there's a little bit of sensitivity around that. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of more as a, by the way, this may happen, but not necessarily. But we want to at least, put it out there in case it becomes a thing.
Cool. Any other questions on that? Okay. Next up is Justin to talk about the Microsoft component detection.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick, and just as an introduction, I'd been talking to Jamie from Microsoft that works on component detection to see if they could contribute some support to GUAC for parsing the component detection tool output. Currently, like, we support, Cyclone DX and SPDX and other inputs in GUAC to parse and ingest information. So I invited a representative, I guess Justin, who's rejoining, to come and present to us, the community, kind of what the tool is and what it does and kind of what its strengths are, so that we can, so everybody can understand how it works. Hey, Justin.
Hey,
yeah, I just
sorry.
gave kind of an intro for what you're going to present. So yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. Sorry about
Maybe
that.
like 5 to 10 minutes on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Justin Perez. I'm working on the open source engineering team at Microsoft, and one of the things we work on is called component detection. And so its main job is to answer this question is, what dependencies does my code use? Because you obviously add some top dependencies, but then those dependencies add dependencies and so on and so forth. So it's hard to keep track of everything that your code uses. So we have this tool called component detection, and it's mainly used as a build time scanning tool, and it can be used as a CLI or a library. And the neat thing is it supports a graph output. So it'll generate a graph of what components use what components for most package managers. And when available, we do actually use the package manager tool to generate the graph. So like the CLI tool, like Go, to actually make the graph. And then at Microsoft, we use it for security and legal compliance. So we check for open source security vulnerabilities, as well as conducting legal reviews to make sure we're complying with open source licenses. So some of the benefits of using this tool is that it's non-invasive standalone. It's just simple C#.NET application that just runs dependencies. You can create some application. We have broad extensive support, so we support, I believe, like 8 or 10 package managers. It's all listed in our GitHub README, and this performs at scale. We scan pretty much every single build of Microsoft with this tool. So it's not invasive in the fact that there's no changes to source code required. The only thing that we require is that you build or restore your project. Because some package managers only create metadata when it's actually built that we need to parse. There's minimal dependencies against a standalone executable, and it works in air-gapped environments, so it doesn't require interconnection. Some detectors do require interconnection, like pip, but that's the only one as far as I know. But you'll still get a top-level dependency, so you won't get like transitive from pip. So these are all the examples we support, from Cargo, like Rust to Yarn, NuGet, PNPM, Ruby, so on and so forth. Not listed here are actually Docker containers, so we can actually list what layers are in Docker containers. So again, this is some stats that we use conjunction with at Microsoft. So around 500,000 builds. It's actually increased a little bit. These are out of these statistics, but it's very fast, less than 15 seconds for most builds. And we scan over 1.3 million packages. So now I'm going to move into a quick demo. Let me share my other window. Okay. Okay. Yes, yes, right. Yeah. Okay. So here I've just checked out the actual source code of our latest release here. Make this bigger. Oh.
Yeah, because the recording will be terrible on Google Meet unless you have like comically large font.
Good enough. All right, perfect. So here I've checked out the latest release, 3.36. And now I can choose run, and if I do check help, we can see account options that it uses. Right now it's building the background, so it's slow. And so you scan list detectors, help version. So if I just list the current detectors that you have, we'll go ahead and run. So these are all detectors that we currently support. So now let's go into actually scanning a repo. So here I'm going to make a quick npm test package. So let's make a quick npm package. We have just run npm init and just yes, all these things. Cool. So now I get little package JSON, and that's all that's there. So now we can go ahead and add the packages to this. So say we want to install Express, which pulls in the dependencies by itself. if I look into what's happened, now I have package lock and node modules. So let's just do a quick sanity check to make sure that this is legit. And we can see that the package lock is generated and we have all of our dependencies in here. So now we can go ahead and scan the component protection. So I'll do run and let's do scan. I'll do okay, so here are all the kind of options that we can use. So the most kind of important ones are the source directory argument, as well as a manifest file, which is actual like JSON file that has the graph of components. We also have a filter, so you can run only certain detectors, as well as Docker images to scan. So to do this, I'm just going to run it against this test repo. So we scan, detect source directory, and to state up to JSON. So if I go ahead and run this, I'm just going to go and scan everything, and you can see that this is supposed to be like a table, but because it's so big, the format's a little messed up. But you can see that we've actually scanned some packages here. So you want to reference, we added that Express, and Express has pulled in 117 transit dependencies. So I go back into here, we should have that manifest.json file. And let's go ahead and open that. And let's kind of view that output. But here's what the manifest file looks like. We have dependency graphs here. You'll see that this doesn't really look like dependency graph because there are two detectors for NPM. We have one that just scans package JSONs and one that scans the actual lock files that build the graph. The package JSONs don't have a graph, so it's just empty. But if I go ahead and I got package lock, we can see that it picked up the package lock, and now we have a graph. So for instance, this QS dependency here has a dependency on side channel, so on and so forth. So you can see here, like Express pulls in all these packages here. We get their version and what ecosystem they use, so NPM, so on. So this is basically the graph, and you can parse this however you so choose. And that's pretty much for detection. We also have support for development dependencies as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo. Are there any questions?
Can this also output in like XPDX or CycloneDX, or is it always going to be in the component detection type of format?
Yeah, so by detection itself doesn't produce like an SBOM, but we do have another open source tool called SBOM tool that uses component detection in the background and will generate those SBOMs for you.
Cool.
Yeah, my understanding is that would flatten the graph, though.
Yeah, it would flatten the graph.
Yeah. So with this, if we were able to ingest the component detection output directly into GUAC, we could get the full graph information in.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's open source, so you can see how it's how the format is. Yeah, Brendan.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. Is the format output that you have, is this something that probably you see gonna be having a few changes, or is it kind of in a state that maybe we could potentially collaborate on ingesting this?
Yeah, so the manifest file format will not change unless we do a major version release, because if we do change that, then our internal tools break. So that format is pretty much guaranteed unless we have a major revision.
Yeah, similar question. Like, how long has component detection been around, and what's the state of the open source project?
Project has been around for, a long time. I think like since 2018. I just joined in January, so my knowledge on that isn't too good, but we've recently open sourced it, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been open source since. Under an MIT license.
I guess my natural follow-up question is there interest in writing a parser for GUAC for this?
Yeah, so I'm collaborating with Jamie to try to get us to do that
Awesome.
and work together.
Yeah, we were discussing like a hackathon project to maybe add support for this in GUAC from the last time we spoke.
Sounds great.
But yeah, if there's no other questions, I'll drop my email in the chat if you have any more questions and links to protection. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or any support.
Thanks. That was a great demo.
Cool. Yeah, that was fantastic. One second here, just pulling back up the notes. So next up is Dijon on the Rust library, and sorry, Mike. One second here. There we go. Yeah.
Hey, can you see this? So I'll also try to be brief and just to get people up.
Can you make the font a lot larger?
Yeah.
It's just the recording will be terrible. Like
yeah.
they compress it so much.
I have a lot of different things to show, so no slides and things like that. So we were starting using GUAC as a like a work set for all kind of metadata and using a lot of projects in Rust. So I played a little bit with the GraphQL API and try to make a small Rust library that can get some kind of information from GUAC that's very interesting for us. So that code at the moment lives in my own repo. We started discussing it briefly to move it to the GUAC organization when the time is right. So I just want to show you a little bit what's there for now. So I implemented just a couple of queries. So getting a dependency based on PureRel, get packages that are dependent on it, get similar packages, different versions of the same package, and getting some of the vulnerabilities. I in the end made a CLI just to again also be easy to work with. What we ended up doing is basically hiding the GraphQL types in the end. So just using a much simpler result output. This is all because it served us better for the use case that we had. But the whole library can be used as like a template for building whatever queries people want to use from Rust. So here's a little bit how that looks. So for example, getting dependence packages based on the PureRel. So this is just a one single SBOM being ingested into the GUAC and certified by the OSV. And vulnerabilities. So there's a bug that I started debugging today, is that the same vulnerability will be in this particular case.
Can you make it bigger? Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So we are getting lists of vulnerabilities based on the package URL and the IDs for OSV or CVEs and things like that. What also can we do here is actually produce a WEX document based on the OpenWEX with the same information if people are interested into that. So this is the base Rust library. So Seedwing is another project that we started working on and where we used this library in the end. So Seedwing is a policy engine with a focus on supply chain security. The engine has its own dogma language and provide different components. So the REST API, the CLI, and the web UI. And you can basically execute different policies against this engine. And the idea is this engine as similar things to be integrated into things like CI/CD or pipelines. And there's actually examples of all these use cases. So basically, try to catch errors as soon as possible. So prevent actually builds that would pull any dependency that doesn't satisfy all the policies. There's another component of this project which is called the seeding proxy, which is basically a proxy between the build systems and all the package managers. So basically, it would intercept all the attempts to download different dependencies and check the policies. So is the dependency has a proper license? Has it been signed? Has it been, have all the attestations? Does it have vulnerabilities? And things like that. So one of the components of this is GUAC, and I will show you how this looks like in practice. So this is an example. Can you see it? I don't think I can make this much bigger because okay, I can a little bit. So this is an example how would you make a pattern in the dogma language. So basically this will get a PURL, get that PURL called the GUAC a certified vulnerability for the given PURL, and then from that create again the WAX document, and finally check if that OpenWAX document have any packages that are affected. So now we can get one of the URLs like shown in the previous demo and try to evaluate. And of course, it's gone now. Where are you? Sorry about this. Of course, give me just a sec. So the pattern. So get the previous pattern. Try to evaluate that pattern against the data, and data is the PURL. And basically, this will fail because this particular dependence PURL has an OSV record that it's vulnerable, right? And another version is green, and the policy is satisfied. So I didn't show you that much here, but I hope you got the idea of the seeding policy engine, and there's a public playground that you can try all these things, and if you go to the documentation, you can see that there's already a lot of policies based on this. And yeah, one of the things is to try to use. So, for example, you can get an SBOM, parse it, SPDX or CycloneDX, get all the PURLs, and then call OSV directly or call GUAC, get the document and check if there's any vulnerabilities in this particular SBOM. So on public sandbox, the GUAC will not work because it at the moment is using the local build. That's the next thing for me to to try to make our public sandbox also have a GUAC instance with some test data that people can go ahead and play with. Any questions?
I think that's super cool. I saw in your demo you had the OpenVex part of it. Is that something I know there was an OpenPR to pass OpenVex document, but is that something that you've experimented with the Seedwing policy engine as well?
Yeah. So getting the vulnerabilities data from Seedwing and then creating a VEX document on the fly from that data. Yeah.
So that would have to be ingested into GUAC, right? And then this way Seedwing can use it later on. Right.
So it's very early days. So I mostly focus on it to satisfy our local requirements for some internal demos and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I would appreciate people take a look at the library, see how it's going, and I would plan to use it not only as a GraphQL API library, but maybe even for writing a GUAC component in Rust at some point. So talking with nets and having some internal structures coming in there. So basically, for people trying to use or develop GUAC with Rust, I would put things there. It's again still early days. There's a lot to improve, and as I said at the beginning, so we don't use it as a general purpose GraphQL library because in the end we concluded that people writing their own queries will have their own requirements and things like that. So you can't do all things for all the people, but if there's any room for improvement, yeah, it's certainly something that we would consider for the future.
Cool. Yeah. I think definitely interested in talking to you a bit more about the Rust side of things because I'm also writing some tools to help out from the GUAC side, specifically on trying to make sure that the docs that we're pulling into GUAC are actually to spec, because a lot of stuff that we're pulling in looks like it's to spec, and then we start running into issues in GUAC when we try to ingest it into GUAC. And there's actually a lot of great stuff I think coming out of the Rust side of things to make a lot of that easy. A lot of the stuff, a lot of rigorous rigorous checking and all that good stuff.
Yeah, great. So I'll put all the links from this in the community notes, and so people can take a look and pick me.
Cool. So next up is, well, actually you already next up on the agenda is to talk about the documentation, but we already did that earlier. So now I think the big item on the list for discussion is talking about persistent database. So for folks who are still just kind of getting used to GUAC right now, early on when we were doing some POCs, we were looking at Neo4j as a backend. We took a step back and right now have an in-memory database for GUAC. A couple of reasons for that is it's it's very simple, it's very easy to test, it's very easy to spin up, and it gives us also it also gives us a nice spot for like a nice baseline, so that as we begin to bring in actual persistent databases, we can kind of compare it against sort of this canonical baseline of the in-memory database. Anyway, so yeah, gonna open it up to the crowd here to see what sorts of databases are folks looking at, what are folks interested in, because we're very open as a community. The idea could be to potentially support multiple databases as well, obviously with the sort of caveat that every time we add on a new potential database, that's a whole burden on us. at the same time, we want to make sure that whatever interfaces we create would allow anybody to, let's say, build their own integration if they wanted to, and support it, or whether it's externally or internally. And then the other thing, just quickly, is also one of the big things, at least for some of the maintainers, is for the backends that we're trying to support. We're looking to support backends that have reasonable licensing, so that, like, because I know some of the ones, like, if you use it, as soon as you use it outside of the open source space, you need to pay for a license, and we're trying not to necessarily use some of those. Cool. Sorry, I cut somebody off, I think.
Sorry, so I pasted, I recently stumbled upon Apache H project, which I think is something, I haven't dig any deeper into it, but it looks interesting from this use case, because I think it supports Cypher as a query language as well, and it's like a attempt to make Postgres a graph database. So I think it could be interesting, right? If we make it compatible with Neo4j and can go back and forth.
Cool. Yeah, a few folks had pointed out that's a new one, and yeah, just, please not DB2.
You said you're open, so want to test it.
Yeah. Jacques?
One suggestion I might have is to consider whether to build a benchmark. Pick some axes of scalability, like number of nodes, variety of nodes, depth and breadth of a graph, that sort of thing, to pressure test some of these alternatives to get a sense of when they break. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oops. Feel free, Brendan, because since I'm running the media, yeah, I'll let you write the notes. I forgot that we actually have folks to write notes. Yeah, I think that's also worthwhile. And I think one of the other things that I know we wanted to also take into consideration is potentially the feature set as well, because some of the some of the databases that we're looking at potentially have, like, bitemporal features. So there's like XTDB, which has bitemporal features. It's not as popular as some of them, but it has bitemporal features. And for some folks who are very interested in this sort of thing, it supports data log as a query language, and some people love that. So wanted to throw that out there. There's also another one that I am blanking on the name of. Somebody, let's see.
RainbowDB or dgraph or anything like that?
Yeah. So there's those. There's a few others that I think also we should consider, which are just there are databases that aren't native graph databases that might still be fast enough from like a SQL perspective to still be able to do what we need, because like we don't need. I mean, I think generally from our end, right, we're not looking at like ridiculously, it doesn't need to be ridiculously fast queries for a lot of what we're doing currently. Yep. So Jeff suggested like SQLite and file system. I think that also is at some level, like I doubt that that's going to be what is used in production per se, but definitely as for testing and a lot of that sort of stuff. I know one of the big things is even when testing, oh no, I turned off my computer and now I got to rerun ingestion. Is not great.
Yeah, I think we're going to need one of those. I don't know if that will be essentially an evolution of the in-memory one we have, that, or we have kind of in-memory, some kind of low performance file system, persistent, and then like the real thing.
Yeah, I think Mihai and I were also chatting a little bit about running this at Google as well, and that means probably like Cloud Spanner, maybe one of the potential databases.
And I think that's that's a good anecdote of potential customers or end users of this, right? Like if it's someone at a really large enterprise or like somewhere like they may not have access to persistent storage when they want to go and create a database, and they will work with a database operator to actually provision the database. And it's like, is that something that's going to be accessible to people to be able to use? Like everybody can get a SQL database of some type. Beyond that, it becomes a little bit harder, whether it's a cloud service provider, like what do they have? At the same time, like some of the features that were mentioned, like sound really cool from a technical perspective, and I would love to see them implemented. But I like if that prevents adoption, and I don't know that we have the end users to ask yet. Like, what would you prefer? Something to consider, though.
I'd like to, and this is a personal preference. Well, two things actually. One, a point of detail, which is that it's SQLite, if according to Dr. Hip, the creator of SQLite, not SQLite. The other one is there's sort of two kinds of stakeholders here. One is folks who are running these systems internally, so running their own instance of GUAC. And they're going to be the ones who are interested in like how is the backend implemented, and then there's the public interest, the public good one. I think it's an open question which set of stakeholders to favor. I favor the public instance. I think that's the one that has transformative possibilities. And if that's the primary stakeholder category, then I would want to pick the technology that scales the best and provides the best mix of features, rather than focusing on the thing that will fit into an existing estate with the least fuss. Because I feel that if it's compelling enough, especially if you can federate with the public instance, if it's compelling enough, people will be able to talk their IT into accepting it. They've been talked into the craziest shit already.
Yeah, I agree on I agree on that one. I think also, right, like the idea should be also whatever we're building out as a backend should not preclude anybody else from attempting to use another one. But I think we you know, the idea is still like, hey, if from the open source perspective, we're trying to kind of support. We can't support A, everything, and B, what we do support, we want to make sure is the one that hits the majority of use cases, hits the majority of scalability things as well, without necessarily, and also is not like ridiculous to maintain. But yeah, I mean, I think then, does it make sense for on that GitHub issue to maybe set up something like a Google Doc or something that we can edit a little bit, where folks can kind of put in, hey, here's a database I saw and I tested it out, you know, some basic stuff, and then we can start to over time make it more rigorous into something that we can, you know, put into something like a stress test suite, you know, a shootout of features, and so on. And also, I think it's worthwhile to, I know this is kind of maybe a bit pedantic, but there is, we should look at, like, there might be certain features in certain databases that don't exist in other databases, but we could still implement layered on top of those databases. And that is something that we should potentially consider, assuming that those features are not ridiculously expensive to implement. Like, for example, there's lots of graph style built-in you know, algorithms inside of some of these graph databases, and in other graph databases those don't exist. I think that is useful to take a look at.
I can take an action item to update that issue at like a Google Doc in there with like a table. People can start kind of brainstorming around this stuff.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions about the backing store? Also, I think one of the things that I know we had discussed previously, and this is something that we might want to look at, is while building that out, can we take the in-memory database and do something like have a feature to just dump that database to a file so that if if the database crashes, or which happens a lot if you're running I have a 32 gig machine, and if I ingest over 32 gigs worth of data, things begin to start crashing. And so I think if there is something on that end that we could also maybe do in the meantime, as long as it's not super difficult. Like if it turns out to be ridiculously difficult because of having to follow all the different pointers and then fetch all that out. And yeah.
Go ahead, Chuck.
There might be an argument there for using a serialization format like Parquet, which has a lot of other tools that it interoperates with.
What was it? Parquet?
Parquet, or Parquet, as sometimes people call it, Parquet. It's pretty popular with data science folks. It's column oriented, such as it is, but most of the advantage of it is that lots of tools can read it and interact with it.
Yeah, I'm a little worried, Michael, that that's kind of like a half solution, though, where you have to preemptively export or like export on clean shutdown or something like that. Or if we had like a file system, like if we had something that was like a lazy write all the time as like a third option, it might be better, but I don't know.
Yeah, no. To be clear here, I was just throwing that out as like the general idea of we want to have some way to throw it out to the file system, whether that is on an ongoing basis, whether that is as a, because ideally, right, still long term, the solution is use an actual database. But but whatever is easiest and gets most of the job done, so that folks don't, as we sort of discussed before, V0.1 is not like we are not expecting folks to be running a GUAC at scale in a production release, but folks who are using this and testing it out are still going to want to be able to say, hey, I'm going to shut down my computer for the day. I want to be able to do this without re-ingesting everything every single time, that kind of thing. Cool. I think that seems to be everything on the database front. Hey, Brandon, did you want to talk about office hours?
Yeah. This one to just be quick. We were chatting about, and I think we got some feedback that it would be nice if we just have some time where people can come in, ask questions about using GUAC or like just contributing to GUAC. So we're gonna try to pilot an office hours. We're gonna start on Friday, the following Friday, 26th of May, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. We're gonna test this out. Want to get some feedback. I think depending on the response and whether we see folks requesting for additional time slots for different time zones, we'll probably do that as well. But yeah, I think once we have the release out, that'll be really soon. I think we would like to kind of focus a little bit more on like, okay, how do you write a processor? How do you write a parser for a new document? We've had a couple of contributors come in and write some code, and we've kind of like guided them along the way and helped out when we can. But I think it'll be nice to do like a nice document tutorial and also have that office hours to get people to come and ask questions about the code base.
Any questions about the office hours? Cool. So I know we have 5 minutes left more for open discussion. I saw there's a question in chat here about the ingestion with current version with in-memory store has slower speed and takes way too long to ingest large file sizes. What are the plans to optimize the performance of ingestion? And when is the first GA release expected for GUAC? So the beta, as a reminder, is in the coming week or so. Once again, that's not really like a production GA release. And we would probably need more details on, what exactly is slow, like how large files are we talking about? Oh, that's weird.
All right.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. Like ingesting GUAC data should take only what, like 20 seconds, 30, yeah, 40 seconds, something like that. Yeah. So that definitely, something's definitely got wrong there, and I don't. Yeah.
If you can create an issue or ping us on Slack, and then in the Slack channel, we can help you.
Yeah, and these are also like, yeah, I was just about to say these are the great things to actually chat with during office hours, where we do plan to make those office hours very much focused on purely like end user kind of questions. Yes, Anjali.
Also, I think we didn't address the second question, which is the one on GA.
Oh.
But I think not sometime in the near future. I would say, like, if anything, if there's a big enough push for people say, like, I want to run this in production, and we ready enough of the community to be able to put in those engineering cycles, then it will be, it could be as early as end of the year. But, this depends a lot on, like, how many folks are want to see this run in production, and also how many more open source contributors we get to kind of get the code base to reach that.
Cool. Sorry, you have your hand raised. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Michael, I just wanted to understand, are there any plans to improvise on the visualizer that has come up with the latest release that has come up? Because the current visualizer is not something, which we can actually use.
Can you explain a bit more what you mean by that?
It's not very user-friendly if you try to use the current visualizer for the vulnerabilities.
Hey, Ashmita, I can talk to
this. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, sorry. So yeah, we just whipped that thing up a couple of weeks ago, but we do have someone working right now to fix up the UI, the UX, fix up the code, and make that more of a real thing. In the coming weeks, we plan to put a lot of work on that. But if you want to chat more about what you're looking to use it for, I'd love to understand a little bit more about your use case. We can see if we can bring that in while we're fixing it up.
Yeah, the UI portion for now is still marked as experimental.
But yeah, we're definitely, I think we would love to hear that feedback. Get, if there's features you want, if there's issues you're seeing in some of it, feel free to open them up. Feel free to, chat about it in the feel free to chat about it in Slack, as well as, come to the, if there's very specific issues you're having, come to the office hours and we can kind of talk through it.
Sure.
And yeah, also the Slack channel, right? If you can reach any of us on the Slack channel. So if you have like an immediate question that you want answered, just reach out.
Sure. Thank you.
I don't know what the other folks want to add on to the question in chat, but architecture changes wise, I don't think there'll be anything major. It'll be likely, like Mihai mentioned, we may change some predicates or add a few predicates based on what people want to do. But other than that, I think it should be pretty solid. Yeah, and check out the memes in the docs as well. Highly recommend.
Cool. So yeah, we're at time, and so stay tuned for the beta release announcement very soon. And come to office hours, come to the Slack chat. Feel free to ping any of us also as well. And we'll hopefully hope to see you in the next meeting.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care, folks.